The stagecoach rattled into Winnemucca, Nevada on a blistering afternoon in July 1878, and when the door opened, Vernon Palmer stepped down with eyes that darted like a trapped animal's, searching every shadow for threats that only she could see. Preston Rutherford had been leaning against the post outside the general store, his hat pulled low against the sun, when he noticed her trembling hands clutching a worn carpetbag. Most folks arriving in Winnemucca came with hope in their eyes, or at least determination. But this woman looked like she was carrying the weight of something terrible on her shoulders. Her dress was respectable but dusty from travel, her dark hair pinned up but disheveled, and those eyes, those frightened brown eyes, kept scanning the street as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. Preston was 26 years old, had worked cattle drives since he was 15, and now ran a modest ranch just outside of town with his business partner Marcus. He had seen plenty in his years, enough to recognize when someone was running from something dangerous. The way she flinched when the stagecoach driver reached for her bag told him everything he needed to know. "Madam," Preston said, stepping forward and touching the brim of his hat politely, "welcome to Winnemucca. You have folks waiting for you here." Vernon's eyes snapped to his face, wide and startled, and for a moment she looked ready to bolt. Up close, he could see she was probably around 23 or 24, with delicate features that would have been pretty if they were not drawn so tight with fear. "I know I do not," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am looking for work. I can sew, cook, clean, anything respectable." Her emphasis on the last word made Preston's jaw tighten. He knew what drove women to make that clarification. "My name is Preston Rutherford. I run a ranch outside town with my partner. We could use someone to help with cooking and keeping the bunkhouse in order if you are interested. The pay is fair, and you would have your own cabin on the property. Safe and secure." Vernon stared at him like he had just offered her the moon. Her lower lip trembled slightly before she caught it between her teeth. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" she asked, suspicion mixing with the fear in her voice. Preston met her eyes steadily. "Because you look like you need somewhere safe to land, and I happen to have somewhere safe to offer. No obligations beyond honest work for honest pay. You can ask anyone in town about my character if you want references first." Before Vernon could respond, a loud voice called out from down the street. "Preston Rutherford, that you?" Preston turned to see Sheriff Tom Henderson walking their way, his badge catching the sunlight. He was a good man, fair and honest, someone Preston respected. "Afternoon, Sheriff," Preston called back. The sheriff stopped when he reached them, nodding politely to Vernon. "Madam, just got a telegram that came in on the wire an hour ago, looking for a woman matching your description. Vernon Palmer, formerly of Carson City." Vernon's face went white as fresh milk and she swayed on her feet. Preston reached out instinctively to steady her elbow. "What's the telegram about, Tom?" Preston asked quietly. The sheriff's expression was grim. "Says she is a runaway wife. Husband wants her returned, offering a reward." "My husband is dead," Vernon said, her voice gaining sudden strength despite her pallor. "He died 6 months ago. The man sending that telegram is his brother, Jacob Palmer. He thinks because his brother owned me like property, that ownership transferred to him when Thomas died." Her words tumbled out faster now, years of suppressed fear and anger giving them force. "Thomas beat me, broke my arm twice, my ribs 3 times. When he died of pneumonia, Jacob showed up at the house and said I was his now, said the law would not help me because I was just a woman and Palmer property. So I ran. I took what little money I had saved and I ran." The sheriff looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Preston knew why. The law was not always on a woman's side in situations like this, especially when property and male relatives were involved. "Madam, I am going to need to verify your story," Sheriff Henderson said, not unkindly. "But if what you are saying is true and your husband is deceased, his brother has no legal claim on you. You are your own person." "The telegram says she is his wife," the sheriff continued. "Do you have any proof of your husband's death?" Vernon fumbled with her carpetbag, pulling out a folded newspaper clipping. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. Preston watched as she handed it to the sheriff, her entire body rigid with tension. Sheriff Henderson unfolded the paper and read aloud. "Thomas Palmer, age 32, died of pneumonia on January 15, 1878. Survived by his wife Vernon and his brother Jacob." He looked up at Vernon. "This is from a Carson City paper." "Jacob is lying in that telegram," Vernon said. "I am a widow, not his wife. He has been telling people we married, but we did not. I would never. I ran instead." Preston felt something protective and fierce rise up in his chest. This woman had been through hell and was still being hunted. "Sheriff, seems to me if Mrs. Palmer is a widow, she is free to go where she pleases," Preston said carefully. "And if she chooses to stay in Winnemucca and work for me, that is her right as a free citizen." Tom Henderson looked between them, then nodded slowly. "I will send a telegram back saying I found no one matching the description. But I am going to wire Carson City and verify this death certificate information. If you are telling the truth, madam, and I believe you are, then legally you are in the clear. But if Jacob Palmer shows up here in person, that might be a different kind of problem." Vernon's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Sheriff, thank you." "Go on with Preston here," Tom said kindly. "He is one of the good ones. You will be safe at his ranch. I will send word when I hear back from Carson City." Preston picked up Vernon's carpetbag before she could protest. "My horse is tied up at the livery. We can get a wagon and head out to the ranch before dark if you are ready." Vernon nodded, still looking dazed, like she could not quite believe someone was helping her without demanding something in return. The ride out to the Rutherford ranch took about an hour. Preston drove the wagon while Vernon sat beside him, silent and tense. The Nevada landscape stretched out around them, all sagebrush and distant mountains, the air hot and dry. Preston did not push her to talk, figuring she would speak when she was ready. Finally, as the ranch buildings came into view, Vernon spoke. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me." Preston considered his answer carefully. "My mother was in a situation similar to yours once, before I was born. A man hurt her badly. She was lucky enough to have people who helped her get away, start fresh. She met my father a few years later and they had a good life together until she passed when I was 12. I figure if people helped her when she needed it, I should do the same when I can." Vernon was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry about your mother. Me too. But she taught me important things before she died. One of them was that you judge a person's character by how they treat people who cannot fight back. Anyone who hits a woman is a coward in my book." They pulled up to the main house, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that Preston and Marcus had built themselves over the past 4 years. The barn and bunkhouse sat nearby, and a smaller cabin stood off to one side, partially hidden by cottonwood trees. "That cabin there, that is where our previous cook stayed before she moved to California with her daughter," Preston explained, pointing. "It has a good stove, a bed, a table, and chairs. The door has a strong lock. You will have complete privacy." Marcus came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his work pants. He was a big man, barrel-chested and bearded, with kind eyes and a booming voice. "Who have we got here, Preston?" he called out cheerfully. "This is Mrs. Vernon Palmer," Preston said, helping her down from the wagon. She's going to be helping us with cooking and housekeeping. Vernon, this is Marcus Brennan, my business partner." Marcus swept off his hat and gave a little bow that made Vernon's lips twitch with the ghost of a smile. "Mighty pleased to meet you, madam. Lord knows we need someone who can cook better than Preston here. Man burns water." "I do not burn water," Preston protested, but he was grinning. "You burned soup last week," Marcus countered. "Soup? How does a man burn soup?" Vernon made a sound that might have been a laugh, soft and surprised, like she had forgotten how. Both men looked at her, pleased to see even that small sign of lightning. Preston showed Vernon to her cabin while Marcus started on evening chores. The little house was clean and simply furnished, with gingham curtains on the windows and a braided rug on the floor. Vernon set down her carpetbag and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "The lock works," Preston said, demonstrating the heavy bolt on the inside of the door. "And Marcus and I sleep in the main house, about 50 yards that way. If you need anything, day or night, you just call out or come knock. We also have 2 ranch hands, Billy and Sam, who sleep in the bunkhouse. Good men, both of them. Been with us for 2 years. Vernon touched the door lock with trembling fingers. "I have not had a door with a lock in 5 years, she said quietly. "Thomas took the locks off all the doors, said I had no right to privacy from my husband." Preston felt anger burn in his gut but kept his voice gentle. "You have every right to privacy here. This is your space, for as long as you want it." Vernon turned to face him, and Preston saw tears streaming down her face. She did not sob or make a sound, just stood there with tears rolling down her cheeks as if a dam had finally broken. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am sorry. I do not usually, I just—" "You do not need to apologize," Preston said firmly but kindly. "You have been through something terrible and you are safe now. You cry if you need to cry. Nobody here will judge you for it." He stepped back toward the door. "I will leave you to settle in. Supper is around 6, but do not worry about cooking tonight. Just rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to start working." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Preston stood on the cabin's small porch for a moment, listening. He heard the bolt slide home with a solid thunk, and then, very faintly, the sound of Vernon Palmer finally letting herself cry in earnest. That night, Preston lay in his bed in the main house, staring at the ceiling. In the other bedroom, he could hear Marcus snoring. Preston's thoughts kept returning to Vernon's frightened eyes and the way she had flinched at sudden movements. It made him sick to think of what she had endured. He must have eventually fallen asleep, because he woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee. Preston dressed quickly and walked into the kitchen to find Vernon already there, wearing an apron over her dress, pulling biscuits from the oven. "Morning," she said quietly, not quite meeting his eyes. "I hope you do not mind. I could not sleep much, so I thought I would start earning my keep." The kitchen table was set for 4, and Preston could see bacon sizzling on the stove, eggs waiting to be scrambled, and fresh coffee steaming in the pot. "Smells incredible," Preston said honestly. "But you did not need to start this early." "I wanted to," Vernon said, and there was something almost desperate in her voice, like she needed to prove her worth. Marcus thundered into the kitchen a moment later, following his nose. "Is that fresh biscuits? Madam, you are an angel sent straight from heaven." Billy and Sam, the 2 ranch hands, were equally appreciative when they came in from the bunkhouse. Vernon barely spoke during the meal, but Preston noticed she was watching everyone carefully, as if trying to learn their patterns and preferences. The food was outstanding. Vernon could really cook, far better than anything Preston or Marcus had ever managed. When the men offered compliments, she ducked her head and murmured thanks, still not quite believing them. After breakfast, Preston explained the general routine of the ranch. "We run about 200 head of cattle, plus some horses. Most days, Marcus and I and the boys are out working the range. We usually come back around noon for a quick meal, then again for supper around 6. The cooking and keeping the house clean, that would be your main duties. Also, once a week we go into town for supplies. You are welcome to come along or stay here, whatever makes you comfortable. Vernon nodded, absorbing all this. What about laundry? We have been taking it to Mrs. Chen in town, but if you are willing to take that on too, we can pay you extra. I am willing, Vernon said immediately. Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Vernon proved to be an exceptional cook and kept the house spotless. She was quiet, almost shy, but Preston noticed she was always watching, always alert. If someone approached from behind without warning, she would jump. Loud voices made her flinch. She kept her back to walls whenever possible. Preston made sure all the men knew to announce themselves before entering rooms, to keep their voices calm and even, to move slowly around her. Marcus understood immediately and passed the word to Billy and Sam, who were both respectful young men in their early 20s. About a week after Vernon arrived, Sheriff Henderson rode out to the ranch. Preston was mending fence when he saw the sheriff coming and felt his stomach tighten with worry. Vernon was hanging laundry behind the house, and Preston saw her freeze when she spotted the lawman. "It is all right," Preston called to her. "Tom is a friend." But Vernon's face had gone pale, and her hands gripped the wet sheet she was holding like it was a lifeline. Sheriff Henderson dismounted and walked over to where they stood. He removed his hat respectfully when addressing Vernon. "Mrs. Palmer, I wanted to update you in person. I heard back from Carson City. Your husband's death has been verified. The death certificate is legitimate. I also did some asking around about Jacob Palmer. Seems he has a reputation for drinking and gambling. He owes money to some dangerous people. I think he was hoping to get his hands on you and any property or money you might have had." Vernon let out a shaky breath. "There was no money. Thomas spent everything on drink. The house was rented. I left with nothing but my clothes and $50 I had hidden away over the years." "Well, legally speaking, Jacob Palmer has no claim on you whatsoever," Tom said firmly. "You are a free woman, Mrs. Palmer. I sent a telegram back making that crystal clear. Also mentioned that if he came to Winnemucca causing trouble, he would be dealing with me. I do not think we will hear from him again, but if we do, you let me know immediately." Vernon's knees seemed to give out and she sat down hard on the ground. The sheet fell from her hands. Preston dropped down beside her, concerned. "Vernon, you all right?" She was crying again, but this time there was something different in it, something like relief mixed with the fear. "I am free," she whispered. "I am actually free." Tom Henderson shifted uncomfortably at the sight of her tears but nodded. "Yes, madam, you are. I will leave you folks be. Preston, you take care." After the sheriff left, Preston sat with Vernon in the grass beside the laundry line. She had her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. He did not touch her, just sat nearby, a steady presence. "I was so afraid," Vernon finally said, her voice muffled by her palms. "I was so afraid he would find a way to force me back, that there would be some law, some rule that said I belonged to him." "You do not belong to anyone but yourself," Preston said gently. "You never did, no matter what they told you." Vernon lowered her hands and looked at him. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but there was something new in them too, a tiny spark that might have been hope. "Why are you so kind to me?" she asked. "You could have turned me away that first day, let the sheriff handle it, but you offered me safety without even knowing me." Preston picked a blade of grass and twisted it between his fingers. "I guess because kindness was offered to my mother when she needed it most, and I believe we are supposed to pass that along. Besides, you are a hard worker and a damn fine cook. I would be a fool to turn you away." That got a real smile from her, small but genuine. It transformed her face, making her look younger and chasing away some of the haunted shadows. "I should finish the laundry," she said, but she did not move immediately. They sat there for a few more minutes in companionable silence, the Nevada sun warm on their faces, the smell of sage on the breeze. Preston felt something shift between them, some small foundation of trust beginning to form. The weeks passed, and summer deepened into August. Vernon gradually became less skittish, though she still startled easily. She began to hum sometimes while she cooked, soft melodies that Preston found himself listening for. She smiled more often, especially at Marcus's terrible jokes and the gentle teasing between the ranch hands. Preston found himself drawn to her in ways he had not expected. It was not just that she was pretty, though she was. As the fear began to leave her eyes and she filled out a bit from regular meals, her natural beauty emerged. But it was more than that. It was her quiet strength, the way she faced each day despite what she had been through. It was her kindness to the ranch animals, the way she always saved scraps for the barn cats and spoke gently to the horses. It was the fierce intelligence he saw in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He was careful not to show his growing feelings. The last thing Vernon needed was another man making demands on her. So Preston kept his distance, was unfailingly polite and respectful, and tried not to think about how much he looked forward to seeing her each morning. One evening in late August, a terrible storm rolled in from the mountains. Thunder shook the house, and lightning split the sky in jagged white forks. Preston was in the main house with Marcus when they heard a scream from Vernon's cabin. Preston was out the door in seconds, running through the pelting rain. He reached Vernon's cabin and pounded on the door. "Vernon, are you all right?" The door flew open and Vernon stood there, white-faced and trembling. "I am sorry, I am so sorry. The thunder it sounded like it reminded me of." She did not finish, but Preston understood. The thunder sounded like fists on doors, like violence. "Can I come in?" he asked, staying on the porch despite the rain soaking him. Vernon nodded and stepped back. Preston entered, careful to leave the door open behind him for propriety. The cabin was neat as always, but he could see her hands shaking. "The storms frighten you," he said gently. "Thomas would get angry during storms," Vernon said quietly. "The noise made his head hurt. He would drink more and then he would." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I know it is foolish. It is just weather. But I hear the thunder and I am back in that house, trying to make myself small, trying to disappear." Lightning flashed again and Vernon flinched hard. Without thinking, Preston opened his arms. Would it help to have someone here? "I can sit in the chair over there. You do not have to be alone with it." Vernon looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. But instead of him sitting in the chair, she stepped forward into his arms, pressing her face against his chest. Preston froze for a second, then carefully wrapped his arms around her, holding her gently. They stood like that through the storm, Vernon trembling against him while Preston murmured quiet reassurances. He told her she was safe, that the storm would pass, that she never had to be afraid in that way again. His shirt grew damp with her tears, but he did not mind. Eventually, the storm moved on, the thunder growing distant. Vernon pulled back slowly, looking embarrassed. "I am sorry," she said. "That was inappropriate of me." "No," Preston said firmly. "It was not. You needed comfort, and I was glad to provide it. There is nothing inappropriate about that." Vernon studied his face in the lamplight. "You have been so good to me, Preston. You and Marcus and everyone here. I do not know how to repay that kindness." "You do not need to repay anything, but Vernon, I need you to know something." Preston took a breath, knowing he was about to cross a line but feeling like she deserved honesty. "I care about you, not as an employer but as a man cares about a woman." I am not asking you for anything, and I will never push you or make you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know that you are valued here, not just for your work, but for who you are." Vernon's eyes widened. "Preston, you do not have to say anything back," he continued quickly. "I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you need is pressure from me. I just wanted you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready to trust a man again, I would like to be considered. But only when and if you are ready. No pressure, no expectations." Vernon reached up and touched his face gently, her fingers light against his cheek. "You are a good man, Preston Rutherford, a truly good man. I do not know if I will ever be ready for what you are offering, but I am grateful you offered it honestly." Preston covered her hand with his just for a moment, then stepped back. "I should let you get some rest, but if you need company again, you just call out. I will hear you from the main house." He left then, walking back through the rain that had softened to a drizzle. His heart was pounding, and he did not know if he had done the right thing by confessing his feelings. But he believed in honesty, and Vernon deserved to know where he stood. In her cabin, Vernon touched her cheek where Preston's hand had been and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It was not fear. It was something warmer, something that felt almost like hope. The next morning, things were slightly awkward at breakfast. Vernon was quieter than usual, and Preston was careful not to stare at her. Marcus, who was more observant than he let on, looked between them with raised eyebrows but wisely said nothing. After the meal, as Preston was heading out to work, Vernon called after him. "Preston, wait." He turned and she walked over to him, worrying her lower lip between her teeth. "About last night," she began, "I have been thinking about what you said." Preston's heart hammered in his chest. "Vernon, you do not have to." "Please let me finish," she said gently. "For 5 years I was married to a man who told me I was worthless, stupid, ugly, who made me feel like I was less than nothing. When I ran, I did not think I would ever want to be near another man again, let alone trust one." She paused, gathering her courage. "But you have shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. You have made me feel safe. And I find myself thinking about you more than I probably should." Preston's breath caught. "I am not ready for anything serious," Vernon continued. "I am still healing, still figuring out who I am without fear, but I would like to try slowly to get to know you better. Not as employer and employee, but as two people who might care about each other. Would that be all right?" Preston felt like the sun had suddenly burst through clouds. "That would be more than all right. We will go as slow as you need, Vernon. I promise." She smiled then, a real genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "Thank you for being patient with me." "I would wait forever if that is what you needed," Preston said honestly, and meant it. Over the following weeks, things shifted between them in small, gentle ways. Preston started finding excuses to be around the house more. He would fix things that did not really need fixing, or come back at odd hours claiming he forgot something. Vernon began saving him the best portions at meals and making his favorite foods. They started taking walks in the evenings after supper, strolling around the ranch property while the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples over the Nevada mountains. During these walks, they talked about everything and nothing. Vernon told him about growing up in a small town in California, about her parents who had died in a typhoid outbreak when she was 18. She explained how she had met Thomas Palmer at church, how he had seemed kind and stable at first, and how quickly that had changed after the wedding. "He was like two different people," she said one evening as they watched the sunset from a hill overlooking the ranch. "Before we married, he was gentle and attentive. After, it was like a mask came off. The first time he hit me was 3 weeks after our wedding. I made his coffee too weak." Preston listened, his jaw tight, letting her talk. "I kept thinking it was my fault," Vernon continued. That if I just tried harder was better, he would go back to being the man I thought I married. But that man never existed. It was always an act. It was never your fault, Preston said firmly. Never. He was a coward and a bully, and nothing you did or did not do justified what he did to you. Vernon looked at him with shining eyes. I am starting to believe that. For the first time, I am starting to believe I did not deserve it. Preston wanted to hold her but waited, letting her set the pace. Vernon stepped closer and rested her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her carefully, and they stood like that, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. I feel safe with you, Vernon whispered. I never thought I would feel safe with a man again, but I do with you. Those words meant more to Preston than all the gold in California. In September, they took the wagon into Winnemucca for supplies. It was the first time Vernon had been back to town since arriving. She was nervous, gripping the wagon seat tightly, but Preston kept up a steady stream of conversation that seemed to calm her. The town was busy with activity, people coming and going from the shops and saloons. Preston helped Vernon down from the wagon and offered his arm. She took it, and they walked together into the general store. Mrs. Henderson, the sheriff's wife who ran the store, greeted them warmly. Mrs. Palmer, how lovely to see you again. And Preston, you are looking well. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, Vernon said shyly. While Preston discussed the supply order with Mrs. Henderson's assistant, the older woman pulled Vernon aside. My dear, I heard about your situation from Tom, Mrs. Henderson said quietly. I want you to know that if you ever need anything, woman to woman, you can come to me. There is a good community of women here in Winnemucca. We look after each other. Vernon felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness. Thank you. That means more than you know. Also, Mrs. Henderson said with a twinkle in her eye, I could not help but notice the way Preston looks at you. That boy has had eyes for you since the day you arrived. Vernon blushed. We are taking things slowly. Smart girl. But I will tell you this. Preston Rutherford is one of the finest young men in this territory. His mother was a dear friend of mine before she passed. She raised him right, taught him to respect women and work hard. If you are looking for a good man, you could not do better. Vernon glanced over at Preston, who was carefully selecting fabric for new kitchen curtains, remembering that she had mentioned the old ones were getting threadbare. Her heart felt full on the way back to the ranch. Vernon was quieter than usual. Preston glanced at her occasionally, worried he had pushed too hard by bringing her to town. You all right? He asked finally. Vernon turned to him with a smile. Yes, actually, I am better than all right. Mrs. Henderson said some very kind things about you. Preston groaned. Oh no, what did she tell you? She said you are one of the finest young men in the territory, Vernon said teasingly, and that your mother raised you right. Well, my mother did raise me right, Preston said with a grin. The finest young man part might be overselling it. Vernon laughed, a sound Preston was hearing more and more often these days. I do not know. I think it might be accurate. They looked at each other, and something passed between them, something warm and promising. Preston reached over and took Vernon's hand. She laced her fingers through his and held on tight. That night, Preston asked Vernon if she would like to have supper with him alone, not with the other ranch hands. She agreed, and they ate together on the porch of the main house, watching the stars come out. I never imagined I could feel like this again, Vernon said softly. Happy, hopeful. You deserve to feel those things, Preston said. You deserve every good thing, Vernon. She set down her plate and turned to face him fully. Preston, I need to tell you something. I am falling in love with you. I fought it at first because I was scared, but I cannot fight it anymore. You have shown me what a good man looks like, what real kindness looks like. And I am falling in love with you. Preston's heart felt like it might burst from his chest. Vernon, I have been in love with you since that first day when I saw you step off that stagecoach. You were so scared but so brave, running toward an unknown future rather than staying in a known hell. I have loved you every day since." Vernon leaned forward and Preston met her halfway. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, Vernon was crying, but this time with joy. "I never thought I would want to kiss a man again," she whispered. "But kissing you feels like coming home." They sat together on the porch for hours, talking and occasionally kissing, making plans for a future that was just beginning to take shape. The darkness that had haunted Vernon's eyes was fading more each day, replaced by light and life and love. Preston told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd and maybe raise horses too. Vernon shared her secret wish to have a garden, to grow vegetables and flowers and beautiful things. They talked about building a life together, slowly and carefully, with trust and respect at its foundation. As autumn arrived and the leaves on the cottonwood trees turned gold, Preston asked Vernon to marry him properly, with a ring he bought in town and a proposal on one knee. She said yes without hesitation, crying happy tears while he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. They were married in October of 1878 in the small church in Winnemucca. Mrs. Henderson helped Vernon make a new dress from beautiful blue fabric, and the whole town turned out for the celebration. Marcus was Preston's best man and cried like a baby during the ceremony. The sheriff gave Vernon away, having become something of a protective uncle to her over the months. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed Vernon gently, and she kissed him back without fear, without hesitation, with nothing but love. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food contributed by half the town. There was music and dancing, and Vernon laughed more in one day than she had in the previous 5 years combined. That night, in the main house that was now their home, Preston carried Vernon over the threshold. She had been nervous about the wedding night, had confessed those fears to him weeks earlier. Preston had promised her they would go at her pace, that there was no rush, that they had the rest of their lives. "I trust you," Vernon said as he set her down gently in their bedroom. "I am still a little scared, but I trust you completely." Preston cupped her face in his hands. "We will go slow, and if you want to stop at any time, we stop. No questions, no pressure. This is about us coming together with love, not about me taking anything from you. All right?" Vernon nodded, and they came together that night with tenderness and care. Preston was patient and gentle, making sure Vernon felt safe and cherished every moment. When Vernon cried afterward, Preston held her close, and she explained these were tears of healing, of reclaiming something that had been twisted and turned into fear. "You have given me back myself," she whispered against his chest. "You have shown me what love really means." The first year of their marriage was full of joy and growth. Vernon's garden flourished in the spring of 1879, bursting with vegetables and bright flowers that she tended lovingly. Preston expanded the ranch, buying more land and increasing their cattle herd. They worked side by side, building something good and lasting. There were hard moments too. Sometimes Vernon would have nightmares about Thomas or Jacob Palmer. She would wake up gasping, and Preston would hold her while she remembered where she was, that she was safe. Each time, the nightmares became less frequent, their hold on her weakening. Once in the spring, a man came to the ranch asking for work. He was tall and dark-haired, and something about him reminded Vernon of Thomas. She froze up completely, could not speak, could barely breathe. Preston saw her reaction and politely but firmly told the man they were not hiring. Later, he held Vernon while she shook, reassuring her over and over that she was safe. "I am sorry," she had said. I know he was nothing like Thomas. I know I am being foolish." "You are not foolish," Preston said firmly. "You are healing from something terrible, and healing is not a straight line. It is all right to have setbacks. I will always be here to help you through them." By the summer of 1879, Vernon was fully a part of the community in Winnemucca. She had become close friends with Mrs. Henderson and several other women in town. She taught Sunday school at the church and was known for her kindness and her beautiful garden. In August, Vernon realized she was pregnant. She was both overjoyed and terrified, memories of how Thomas had treated her mixing with hopes for this new life. She told Preston one evening as they sat on their porch, her hands trembling as she placed one on her belly. "I am going to have a baby," she said. "Our baby." Preston's face lit up with pure joy. He pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to be parents. Vernon, you are going to be such an amazing mother." "What if I am not?" Vernon asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I do not know how because of how I grew up, because of Thomas?" Preston pulled back and looked into her eyes. "You are the kindest, most nurturing person I know. You will be an incredible mother because you know what it is like to hurt, and you will make sure our child never feels that pain. And I will be right beside you every step of the way." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Preston was attentive and caring, making sure Vernon did not overwork herself and keeping her supplied with pickles and whatever odd foods she craved. Marcus turned into a protective uncle figure, constantly worrying about Vernon overexerting herself. In March of 1880, Vernon gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Preston feared losing her. But Vernon was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and she brought their son into the world with fierce determination. They named him Peter Marcus Rutherford, after Preston's father and Marcus. The baby had Preston's dark hair and Vernon's brown eyes, and Preston thought he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, second only to his wife. Watching Vernon with their son healed something deep in Preston's soul. The fear in her eyes was completely gone now, replaced with a love so fierce and protective it took his breath away. She sang to Peter, soft lullabies she remembered from her own mother. She held him gently and spoke to him constantly, telling him stories and promises of the good life they would build together. "He will never know fear in this house," Vernon said one night as she rocked their sleeping son. "He will never wonder if he is loved or safe. That is my promise to him." Preston kissed her forehead. "He is the luckiest boy in the world to have you as his mother." The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. Peter grew into a bright, happy child who loved horses and following his father around the ranch. In 1882, Vernon gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Victoria Rose. She had Vernon's delicate features and Preston's smile. The ranch prospered. Preston's horse breeding program became well known throughout Nevada, and people came from all over to buy his stock. Vernon's garden expanded each year, and she started selling produce and preserves in town, giving the money to the church to help families in need. Marcus eventually married a widow named Sarah who moved to Winnemucca with her young daughter. The two families became inseparably close, their children growing up together like siblings. Billy and Sam both settled down with local girls, building their own homes on the ranch property with Preston's help. By 1885, Vernon could look back at the frightened woman who stepped off that stagecoach 7 years earlier and barely recognize her. She was confident now, happy, surrounded by love and purpose. The scars from her past would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her. One evening in late summer, Vernon and Preston sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Peter was 7 now, chasing his little sister around while she shrieked with laughter. The sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and purple, painting the Nevada sky in fire. "You remember the first time we sat on this porch together?" Vernon asked, leaning against Preston's shoulder. "I remember everything about that night," Preston said, kissing the top of her head. "You told me you were falling in love with me." "I was so scared," Vernon said. "Scared to trust you, scared to believe that good men existed. But you showed me safety, Preston. You showed me what real love looks like, and you never let the darkness return." Preston turned her face toward his and kissed her gently. After all these years, her kisses still made his heart race. "You saved yourself, Vernon," he said seriously. "You were the one brave enough to run, to seek a better life. All I did was provide a safe place to land." Vernon shook her head. "You did so much more than that. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me patience and kindness when I expected cruelty. You loved me when I did not think I was worth loving. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." Their children ran up to the porch, breathless and grass-stained. Peter climbed into Preston's lap while Victoria settled on Vernon's. "Tell us the story," Peter demanded, "about when Mama came to Winnemucca." It had become their favorite bedtime story, the tale of how their parents met. Preston and Vernon exchanged amused glances. "Well," Preston began, "it was a hot day in July and the stagecoach rolled into town. When the door opened, the most beautiful woman I had ever seen stepped out. But she was scared," Victoria chimed in, knowing the story by heart. "She was," Vernon agreed, smoothing her daughter's hair. "I was very scared, but then a kind cowboy offered me safety and a place to call home. And they fell in love," Peter said dramatically, "and got married and had us." "That is right," Preston said, hugging his son close. "And we lived happily ever after." "Are we at the happily ever after part now?" Victoria asked. Vernon looked around at her family, at the home they had built, at the life she never dreamed possible 7 years ago. She thought about the frightened woman who had arrived in Winnemucca with nothing but a carpetbag and $50, running from a nightmare toward an uncertain future. "Yes, sweetheart," Vernon said, her voice full of emotion. "We are definitely at the happily ever after part." As the stars came out one by one in the vast Nevada sky, the Rutherford family sat together on their porch. The darkness that had once haunted Vernon's days was gone completely, replaced by the warm glow of love and family. Preston kept his arm around his wife, and Vernon rested her head on his shoulder, both of them watching their children with hearts full of gratitude. In the distance, they could hear Marcus and Sarah's laughter from their house, and the soft lowing of cattle settling down for the night. The ranch that Preston had built with hard work and determination had become something more than just a business. It had become a sanctuary, a place where broken things were mended and new lives began. Preston thought about that day 7 years ago when he had seen a frightened woman step off a stagecoach and made the snap decision to offer help. It was the best decision he had ever made. Vernon had brought so much light into his life, had taught him about true courage and resilience. She had made him a better man, a better husband, and now a better father. Vernon thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the pain and fear that had preceded this moment of perfect peace. She thought about Thomas and the years of abuse, about the terrifying decision to run, about stepping into the unknown with nothing but desperate hope. Every hard step had been worth it to arrive at this life, these people, this love. "I love you," Preston whispered, soft enough that only Vernon could hear. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for showing me that love does not have to hurt, that it can heal instead." The children eventually grew sleepy, and Preston carried Peter inside while Vernon brought Victoria. They tucked their children into bed, kissed them goodnight, and stood together in the doorway watching them sleep. "We made some pretty wonderful humans," Preston said quietly. "We did," Vernon agreed. "And they will grow up knowing they are loved, knowing they are safe. That is all I ever wanted for them." Later, in their own bed with the windows open to the cool night air, Preston and Vernon lay together in comfortable silence. Vernon traced patterns on Preston's chest while he played with her hair, both of them savoring the quiet intimacy. "Do you ever think about what your life would be like if you had not helped me that day?" Vernon asked. Preston considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. And then I remember that I would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me. I would have missed falling in love with you, building this life with you, having our children. That alternate life seems empty in comparison." Vernon propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. Even in the dim moonlight filtering through the curtains, she could see the love in his eyes. "I used to think my story was a tragedy," she said slowly. "I thought the bad things that happened to me defined who I was. But you showed me that those things were just chapters, not the whole book. You helped me write a new story, one with hope and love and a happy ending." Preston pulled her down for a kiss, pouring all his love and devotion into it. When they parted, both were smiling. "Our story is far from over," Preston said. "We have so many more chapters to write together, watching our children grow, growing old together, maybe even grandchildren one day." "Grandchildren," Vernon said with a laugh. "Let us not get ahead of ourselves. Our children are still quite young." "True," Preston admitted. "But I plan to love you through every chapter, Vernon. Every single one, until we are old and gray and sitting on that porch telling our great-grandchildren about how we met." Vernon snuggled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "That sounds perfect." The years continued to roll by like a gentle river. Peter grew tall and strong, with his father's build and his mother's compassionate heart. He took to ranching naturally, learning everything Preston could teach him about horses and cattle. Victoria was bright and fierce, with a love of books and a talent for drawing. She sketched everything she saw, filling journal after journal with images of ranch life. In 1887, Vernon and Preston welcomed their third child, another boy they named Paul. He was a quiet, thoughtful child who loved animals and could often be found in the barn talking to the horses or playing with the barn cats. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Preston hired more hands as the operation expanded, always making sure to employ men of good character who treated everyone with respect. The little community that grew up around the Rutherford Ranch became known as a good place to work, a place where people were treated fairly and families were welcomed. Vernon became a pillar of the Winnemucca community. She started a lending library in town, donating books and encouraging literacy. She taught women's classes at the church, everything from cooking to managing household finances. When new women arrived in town, especially those running from difficult situations, Vernon was always there with a kind word and practical help. She never forgot what it felt like to arrive in a strange place with frightened eyes and nowhere to turn. She made it her mission to ensure no other woman had to face that alone. With Mrs. Henderson and other women in town, Vernon helped establish a network of support for women in crisis, offering shelter, resources, and protection. Preston supported her efforts completely, often providing financial backing, or using his influence with other ranchers and businessmen to help women find honest work. He had learned from Vernon that strength was not just about physical power, but about using whatever resources you had to protect and lift up others. One particularly meaningful moment came in 1889, when a young woman arrived in Winnemucca, fleeing an abusive husband. She stepped off the stagecoach with the same frightened eyes Vernon had once had, clutching a small child to her chest. Vernon approached her immediately. "My name is Vernon Rutherford," she said gently. "You look like you could use some help." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I do not have anywhere to go. I do not have any money." "You have somewhere now," Vernon said firmly. She took the woman and her child to the church, where they had set up a small room for exactly this purpose. Over the following weeks, Vernon helped the woman find work and get settled, watching her slowly transform from frightened victim to confident survivor. "You did for her what Preston did for me," Vernon told her husband one evening. Preston shook his head. "No, you did that all yourself. I just provided the space. You are the one doing the real work now, helping these women find their strength." Vernon smiled. "We are both helping, just like we help each other." As their children grew into teenagers, Preston and Vernon focused on teaching them about respect, hard work, and compassion. Peter learned that being strong meant protecting those weaker than yourself, not exploiting them. Victoria learned that being a woman did not limit her possibilities, that she could be educated and independent. Paul learned that gentleness was not weakness, that caring for others was a strength. By the early 1890s, Peter was old enough to take on real responsibility at the ranch. He worked alongside his father, learning the business inside and out. Victoria, now 15, had set her sights on becoming a teacher. She studied voraciously and helped her mother teach the younger children in town. Paul, at 12, had developed a real talent with horses, able to calm even the wildest Mustang with patience and kindness. Preston and Vernon watched their children with pride, seeing the good people they were becoming. Every choice they had made, every value they had instilled, was bearing fruit in these bright, compassionate young people. One evening in the spring of 1893, the whole family gathered for supper. It had become tradition for Sunday dinners to include Marcus and Sarah's family, along with any ranch hands who did not have family nearby. The long table was crowded with people and food, full of laughter and conversation. After the meal, as Vernon was clearing dishes, Victoria came to help her in the kitchen. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Victoria said quietly. Vernon smiled at her daughter. "Of course, sweetheart. What is on your mind?" "James Henderson asked if he could court me," Victoria said, referring to the sheriff's grandson who had recently moved to Winnemucca. "I wanted to know what you thought." Vernon set down the plates she was holding and turned to her daughter. Victoria was so beautiful, so full of life and possibility. Vernon felt a familiar protective instinct rise up, along with memories of her own experience with courtship and marriage. "What do you think of James?" Vernon asked carefully. "I like him," Victoria said. "He is kind and smart. He makes me laugh. But Mama, I know what happened to you with my father's name, I mean your first husband. How do I know someone is good? How do I know I am making the right choice?" Vernon pulled her daughter into a hug. This was a conversation she had known would come someday and had thought carefully about how to handle. "Sweetheart, let me tell you what I have learned," Vernon said, holding Victoria at arm's length so she could look into her eyes. "A good man will treat you with respect always. He will value your opinions even when he disagrees. He will never try to control you or make you feel small. He will support your dreams, not crush them. And he will never, ever raise a hand to you in anger." Victoria nodded, listening intently. "Your father, Preston, showed me what a good man looks like," Vernon continued. "He is patient and kind. He listens. He treats me as an equal partner. When I am scared, he comforts me without making me feel weak. When I am strong, he celebrates it without feeling threatened. That is what you should look for, Victoria. someone who makes you feel more yourself, not less. James is like that, Victoria said thoughtfully. But how long should I wait to be sure? Vernon smiled. There is no rush, my darling. You are only 15. Take your time getting to know him. If he truly cares for you, he will be willing to wait while you figure out your own heart. And remember, you do not need to marry at all if you do not want to. You can have a full, wonderful life as an independent woman. The choice is always yours. Victoria hugged her mother tightly. Thank you, Mama. You have always made me feel like I can do anything. You can, Vernon said firmly. You can do absolutely anything you set your mind to. That conversation stayed with Vernon long after Victoria went to bed. She thought about the frightened girl she had been at 18, marrying Thomas because it seemed like the only option, the expected path. She was so grateful her daughter would never feel that same pressure, would grow up knowing she had choices. Later that night, Vernon shared the conversation with Preston as they prepared for bed. Our little girl is growing up, Preston said with a mixture of pride and melancholy. James Henderson is a good young man, but I am not ready for Victoria to be courted. Vernon laughed softly. Neither am I. But we raised her to be smart and strong. We have to trust her to make good decisions. Preston pulled Vernon close. You were amazing with her tonight, sharing your wisdom, making her feel empowered. You are such a good mother, Vernon. I had a good example in you, Vernon said. Watching how you treat me showed our children what real love looks like. They will never settle for less because they have seen what more looks like. They stood together by the window, looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. So much had changed since that July day in 1878. The frightened woman and the cowboy who helped her had built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone. Do you ever think about Jacob Palmer? Preston asked quietly. Wonder what happened to him? Vernon rarely thought about her dead husband's brother anymore, but the question brought up old memories. Sometimes. Sheriff Henderson told me years ago that Jacob died in a bar fight in Carson City, maybe 1881 or 82. Owed the wrong people money and paid for it with his life. She felt Preston's arms tighten around her protectively, even though the threat was long past. I used to be afraid he would find me, Vernon continued. That he would show up and try to drag me back, but I am not afraid anymore. Even if he had lived, even if he came here, I would not be that scared woman anymore. I have you, our children, this life we built. I have found my strength, and nobody can take that from me. Preston kissed her temple. You always had that strength, Vernon. You just needed the space to let it grow. As the 1890s progressed, the Rutherford Ranch became one of the most successful operations in northern Nevada. Preston's horses were renowned throughout the territory and beyond. Vernon's charitable work touched countless lives. Their children were thriving, growing into exceptional young adults. Peter, at 20, started courting a rancher's daughter named Ellen from a neighboring property. She was a capable young woman who could ride and rope as well as any man, and she and Peter were clearly well matched. Vernon and Preston both approved, seeing in their relationship the same mutual respect and affection that marked their own marriage. Victoria did eventually allow James Henderson to court her properly, under her parents' careful supervision. She was 17 now, and while romance bloomed between them, Victoria made it clear she wanted to pursue teaching first before even thinking about marriage. James, proving himself worthy, supported her dreams completely. Paul, at 15, was already being consulted by other ranchers about their difficult horses. He had his mother's gentle spirit and his father's steady determination, a combination that made him exceptional at his work. In 1895, Preston and Vernon celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. They took a rare trip alone together, leaving the ranch in Peter's capable hands for a week. They traveled to San Francisco, something Vernon had always wanted to do. Walking along the waterfront, Vernon held Preston's hand and marveled at how far she had come. From a battered wife with nothing but a carpetbag and desperate hope, to a confident woman with a family, a purpose, and a love that sustained her every day. "What are you thinking about?" Preston asked, seeing the thoughtful expression on her face. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Vernon said. "For you, for our life, for everything we have built together. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." Preston stopped walking and turned to face her fully, right there on the busy street. "Vernon Rutherford, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Loving you, building a life with you, raising our children with you, it has been the greatest privilege of my life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Vernon rose on her toes to kiss him, not caring who saw. "I love you, Preston, today, tomorrow, and every day after that." They returned to Winnemucca refreshed and even more in love than when they left. The ranch welcomed them home with the organized chaos Vernon had come to cherish. Peter reporting on the week's activities, Victoria showing them her latest drawings, Paul demonstrating a new training technique he had developed with a particularly stubborn mare. That evening, sitting on their familiar porch with the Nevada sunset painting the sky, Vernon felt a deep sense of peace. She had everything she had ever wanted and more things she had never even known to dream of. "Mama, Papa," Peter called from the yard. "Come quick, the mare is foaling." The whole family rushed to the barn, where one of their best mares was indeed in labor. They all watched in reverent silence as new life entered the world, a beautiful colt that struggled to his feet on wobbly legs within the hour. "What should we name him?" Paul asked, gently stroking the colt's nose. "Hope," Vernon said softly. Everyone looked at her and she smiled. "We should name him Hope, because that is what carried me here and that is what has sustained us." Preston put his arm around her shoulders. "Hope is a perfect name." As they walked back to the house later that night, leaving Paul to keep watch over the mare and her new colt, Vernon looked up at the stars. The same stars that had shone down on that frightened woman arriving in Winnemucca 17 years ago, now illuminated a life beyond her wildest dreams. She thought about all the women she had helped over the years, all the frightened eyes that had gradually cleared as they found their own strength and safety. She thought about her children, raised with love and respect, going out into the world to make it better. She thought about Preston, her constant companion and truest love, who had shown her that goodness existed in the world. The darkness that had once consumed her life was gone completely now, banished by years of love and healing. In its place was light, warmth, family, and purpose. Vernon had not just survived, she had thrived, and she had helped others do the same. Years continued to pass in their gentle rhythm. Peter married Ellen in 1897, and they built a house on the ranch property, continuing the expansion of the family operation. Their first child, a daughter named Grace, was born in 1898, making Vernon and Preston grandparents for the first time. Holding her granddaughter, Vernon wept with joy. This tiny, perfect baby represented a future free from the shadows of the past. Grace would grow up surrounded by love and protection, would never know what it was like to live in fear. The cycle of violence and pain that could have continued through generations had been broken forever. Victoria became a teacher, just as she had dreamed, teaching at the Winnemucca School. She eventually married James Henderson in 1900, a beautiful ceremony that celebrated not just their love, but the deep friendship they had built over years of courtship. Vernon watched her daughter exchange vows with a man who clearly cherished and respected her, and felt grateful beyond words. Paul took over the horse training aspects of the ranch, developing a reputation as one of the finest horse trainers in the West. He had his mother's patience and his father's business sense, a combination that served him well. In 1902, he married a quiet bookkeeper named Martha, and they settled into a peaceful life together. Through all these changes and celebrations, Vernon and Preston remained each other's anchors. They grew older together gracefully, silver threading through their hair, laugh lines deepening around their eyes. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it deepened with each passing year. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children and grandchildren threw them a grand celebration. The whole town of Winnemucca turned out, along with friends and family from across Nevada. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and music, and more food than could possibly be eaten. When Preston and Vernon danced together under the stars, holding each other close while their family and friends looked on, Vernon thought back to that terrified woman stepping off the stagecoach a quarter-century earlier. "Thank you," she whispered to Preston as they swayed to the music. "For what?" he asked, though he was smiling like he knew. "For seeing me when I felt invisible, for offering safety when I had none, for loving me when I did not think I was worthy of love, for never letting the darkness return." Preston pulled back to look into her eyes, those same brown eyes that had been so frightened once and now shone with confidence and joy. "Vernon, you did the hard work of healing yourself. You chose to trust again, to love again, to build a new life. I just had the incredible privilege of being part of that journey." Vernon shook her head, smiling through happy tears. "We did it together, every step together." "Together," Preston agreed and kissed her as their family cheered. As the party wound down and guests began heading home, Vernon stood with Preston watching the sun set one more time from their beloved porch. Their children and grandchildren played in the yard, 3 generations of Rutherfords living proof that love could overcome fear, that kindness could heal wounds, that choosing compassion over cruelty could change the world. "You think we made a difference?" Vernon asked quietly. "Not just with our family, but with all the women we helped, all the lives we touched." Preston considered the question seriously. "I think we made all the difference in the world to the people we helped. Every woman who found safety, every child who grew up without fear, every person who learned that love does not have to hurt. That is the legacy we are leaving, Vernon. Not just this ranch or our family name, but the knowledge that goodness exists, that people can change, that it is never too late to start over." Vernon leaned against her husband, watching her grandchildren chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Little Grace was 7 now, bold and bright. Peter and Ellen's son William was 5, already showing his grandfather's talent with horses. Victoria and James had twin girls, Clara and Catherine, who were 3 and absolutely inseparable. Paul and Martha's baby boy, named Preston after his grandfather, toddled around under the watchful eyes of his older cousins. All these beautiful children, growing up in a world shaped by the choice Preston had made to offer help to a frightened stranger, and the choice Vernon had made to accept that help and build something new. The darkness that had once threatened to consume Vernon's entire life had been pushed back by light and love, had been transformed into wisdom and strength that she used to help others. The cowboy who had shown her safety had become her partner in creating a legacy of compassion and healing that would ripple out through generations. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast Nevada sky, Vernon and Preston sat together in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined. They had grown old together, had weathered storms and celebrated joys, had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of Vernon's painful past. "I would not change a single moment," Vernon said softly. "Not even the painful ones, because they led me here to you, to this life." Preston raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Neither would I. You are my heart, Vernon. You always will be." Inside the house, their children were putting the grandchildren to bed, their voices carrying through the open windows in a familiar, beloved symphony. Outside, the ranch that had been their sanctuary stretched out under the starlight, peaceful and prosperous. Vernon Palmer Rutherford, who had arrived in Winnemucca 25 years earlier with frightened eyes and a desperate hope, looked around at the life she had built and felt nothing but profound gratitude. The cowboy who had shown her safety had given her so much more than shelter. He had given her partnership, love, family, and purpose. He had helped her reclaim herself and then build something entirely new. And the darkness, that terrible darkness that had haunted her for so long, had never returned. In its place was only light, spreading out through their family, their community, and all the lives they had touched. It was a light that would continue to shine long after they were gone, carried forward by their children and grandchildren and all the people they had helped along the way. As Vernon and Preston finally headed inside for the night, arms around each other, they looked back one last time at the ranch bathed in moonlight. This place, this life, this love, it was everything. It was home, safety, and family. It was the happy ending Vernon had never believed possible, and the greatest blessing Preston had ever known. The story that began with a frightened woman and a kind cowboy had become a legacy of hope, proving that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn, and that love, real love, could heal anything. And they lived the rest of their days in joy and peace, surrounded by family, respected by their community, and deeply, enduringly in love, never letting darkness return to touch their lives again.